So you've all probably heard about the drama surrounding the movie Don't Worry Darling, and I went to the cinema and watched this movie this week. And I had a lot of thoughts about the movie, so I wanted to share my analysis/review about it with all you guys. And just heads up, this video is going to contain a lot of spoilers for the movie. So I'll just give a quick synopsis of the movie. So Florence Pugh's character, named Alice, is married to Harry Styles' character, named Jack. And they live in a suburban 1950s American society. And she is a housewife, and although the other women in that society also stays at home with the children, while all the men goes to work during the day, and they are not allowed to ask any questions about what they do for a living. And they also live in the society which is called kind of the Victory Project, which is headed by Chris Pine's character named Frank. But Alice, meaning Florence, gets a lot of visions that might suggest that everything that she thinks is real probably isn't. And the movie is about her trying to figure out what's up and how to get out of this seemingly not real reality. So we find out in the end that this 1950s community is a simulation created by Frank, Chris Pine's character. So the simulation was created to give men the opportunity to have the perfect 1950s life, with them being the breadwinners and them having a wife that will tend to their every need. So most of the women don't know that they are in a simulation. We don't get an explicit answer about what all of the different women in the simulation's situation is, but at least for Florence, her character Alice was kind of captured by Harry, her boyfriend, and he has strapped her to their bed and has forced her into this simulation. And the movie ends with Alice realizing that this is a simulation and trying to escape. So the movie has an open ending, and we see Alice go through a portal that will make her wake up from the simulation, and then the screen fades to black and we hear her draw a breath. So it's not explicitly stated that she is able to escape, but we might presume that she does. So my first problem with Don't Worry Darling is its structure. The first 3/4 of the movie is us exploring this 1950s world and Alice having different visions. And the last quarter of the movie is Alice realizing what's happening, that this world is a simulation. And some of the questions posed in the first part are answered, and then Alice escapes. So in my opinion, more time should have been spent on the second half of the movie, so that we actually could explore the themes in the movie, and so that we would get some answers to the questions that were posed in the first part of the movie. Because some questions were just left unanswered. For instance, there are a lot of earthquakes happening throughout the movie, or just the ground starts to shake, and we're told throughout the movie that these earthquakes has something to do with the work that the men do at the Victory Project. However, we later learn that when all of the men leave for work, they actually leave the simulation to go back to their real lives and to go to their actual jobs, because it costs money to be in this simulation. So they still have to earn real money. So this question is just left out in the open without any answers. Furthermore, the first part of the movie just drags on. We could have cut out a lot of the different visions because their only function is just to make the movie scary, and it's fine, but just gets boring after a while. But the main reason why I had this criticism is because I do think there are very many interesting themes in Don't Worry Darling. And I'm a bit disappointed that those themes aren't explored as much as they could have been. So, for instance, the movie portrays how women are treated today in society, and also a metaphor for incel culture. Because we learn that Frank is an inspirational speaker in the real world, and Jack, Harry Styles' character, listened to his podcasts. So Jack feels insecure and his masculinity is threatened because Alice is the breadwinner of their family. And she spends a lot of time at work because he lost his job, so she has to take more shifts working at the hospital to be able to provide for them, and this threatens his masculinity. In addition, she doesn't want to have sex with him when she's at home because she's tired, and he obviously feels entitled to have sex with her. Furthermore, we're not given a definitive answer to this, but it seems like he's either unable or unwilling to make food without her, because when she is working at the hospital, he gets hungry and he doesn't make food for himself, he just waits for her to get home. And we know at least that he connects the act of making food with his female significant other. So the movie also touches on the theme of radicalization, because as Jack is unemployed, he is spending a lot of time at home on his computer. And we see one scene where Jack is listening to one of Frank's inspirational speeches. And I think this kind of reflects how a lot of people are radicalized these days. They are disconnected from the world and lonely and are unhappy in their relationships and home life. And they fall into dark places on the internet, where someone very charismatic as Frank gives them an opportunity to join a community of like-minded people that also feel that they have been wronged. And I was for a long period of time unsure if this movie was about assimilation or a cult set in the 1950s, because Frank seems very much like a cult leader. He is very charismatic, and when you listen to his speeches, they're very inspirational, and you can see that the community is very taken with him. But when you actually try to listen to the content of the speeches, you realize that it's just meaningless words. He's talking about mining the potential of each and every one in the community. He also talks a bit about us versus them outside, who are trying to stop us and are afraid of progress because we are making so much progress in here. So he's creating this divide between us, the good people, and the others outside that are the bad people. And there's a bit of a weird scene in the beginning of the movie that gave me the impression that this might be a sex cult. Because all of the main characters are at a dinner party at Frank's house, and Jack and Alice are in Frank's bedroom and they're having sex, and then Frank walks in. And he's looking at Alice, and then their eyes meet, and he ends up walking out of the room. So I thought that this might have been a cult he started so he would be able to have sex with all of the women in there, or at least watch them have sex. But this isn't addressed or resolved any later. It's mentioned again, but it doesn't have any consequences in the movie. So I thought it was interesting that the movie had depicted other themes than just feminism, but also talked about radicalization, because it's very important that we learn more about it and learn to see the signs of someone being radicalized so we can stop it early on. And also cults and incel culture is very dangerous, so it's also important that these topics get addressed. And I thought it was good that the movie addressed incel culture, especially because that is a topic that feminism is facing today. Because a lot of movies that are released today that are quote-unquote feminist and girl boss movies try to present the past as being more sexist than it actually was, to convince you that we live in a more progressive society than we actually do. and that feminism has come further along than it actually has. For instance, Camila Cabello's Cinderella movie from 2021 says that women weren't allowed to own a business in the past, but that isn't true. It was harder for women to own a business, firstly because of lack of opportunities for an education within different fields. But if a woman had a father that was working within a field, she might have the opportunity to learn from him. Furthermore, if a woman had a husband that was running a business, for instance, he was a merchant, and he died, then his widow could take over that business and be the owner of the business. So it's not like women weren't legally allowed to own a business, it was just harder for them to be able to do so. Moreover, the Beauty and the Beast live-action version from 2017, Emma Watson's Belle is shamed by her village for trying to teach a young girl how to read. However, this wasn't the case in 18th century France. There were books and magazines specifically made for young girls at the time, so young girls and women in general were allowed to read, and many of them were literate. So these very simplistic views of misogynism in the past don't leave any room for the complex issues that we're facing today because of misogynism. And this is why I appreciate Don't Worry Darling, because it has a more complex view on how misogynism is today. Furthermore, the movie portrays a more nuanced character of Bunny, played by Olivia Wilde. And she actually knows that she is in a simulation, and she agreed to go into this simulation because she lost her children in the real world, and in this simulation she is allowed to keep them even though they aren't real. Therefore, she allows her husband to treat her as his object. Furthermore, she allows the other men of the Victory Project to capture and hold their partners imprisoned in this simulation. And she repeatedly gaslights the other women when they try to question if there's something wrong with their reality. For instance, one of Bunny and Alice's best friend, Margaret, realized some time ago that she was in a simulation and had been imprisoned there by her husband. So she tried to get out, and she tried to warn the other women about what was happening. But Bunny, knowing that this is true, told everybody else and is continuously telling the story that Margaret is crazy and doesn't allow for any other opinion, even though Alice tries to sympathize with Margaret and say that she was struggling. Bunny just says she's crazy. There's nothing more to it. She tries to make Margaret the villain. And she does this so that no other women will realize that they are actually imprisoned, so that she can stay in this simulation with her children. So we have this character that has an understandable reason for wanting to stay in the simulation, to be with her kids, but in the process that sacrifices her own independence and also the independence and the lives of all the other women in this simulation. So Bunny is a complex character that is willing to enforce sexism both on herself but also everybody else to get to her understandable goal, which we also can acknowledge in the movie that isn't right of her to do. However, after Alice kills Jack, Bunny confesses to Alice that she has known that they are in a simulation the whole time. And she also warns Alice that now that she has killed Jack, Frank and his henchmen are going to kill Alice, and that Alice has to run to headquarters and escape the simulation to survive. So in this instance, Bunny prioritizes another woman over herself, and she realizes that the misogynistic structures that have benefited her before are wrong, because someone she's close to and really cares about is on the receiving end of these structures' disdain, thus adding another layer to her character. Nevertheless, the movie is not without its faults. Firstly, while the cast of Don't Worry Darling is ethnically diverse to some extent, the cast is dominated by white actors, and that same goes for the background actors. Moreover, this is obviously the story of a white woman struggling against the patriarchy, and not the story of women in general struggling against the patriarchy, because women of color don't have the same struggles as white women have, because they don't face just the power imbalance between men and the other genders, but also the power imbalance between the perceived notions of different races. And arguably the most significant character played by a person of color is the character Margaret, played by Kiki Layne. And Margaret is the first person that notices that something is wrong with the Victoria Project. And though it's probably meant to be a good thing that the arguably cleverest character in the movie, as Margaret is the first one to figure out that something is wrong with the Victoria Project, they still represent this black woman as being crazy, thus inadvertently also playing into stereotypes. And I think that this could have been an interesting topic to explore if they had executed it a bit better. For instance, I think it could have been interesting if they delved into the differences between the struggle that white people who don't identify as male faces in contrast to the struggles that people of color who don't identify as male faces. And the movie would also have contributed positively to this conversation if they had promoted the idea that we need to help each other and that we aren't free unless all of us are free. In addition, though the ideas of feminism and the messages of the movie are more complex than some other movies that have been released recently, the messages and ideas aren't that complex. Because the ideas the movie presents are essentially that a woman finds out that she lives in a sexist society and that this feels suffocating, and that the power imbalances that promotes male superiority are bad. And this is for certain not the first movie that deals with this issue, and probably won't be the last movie that deals with it either. So it would have been a bit more impressive if the movie would have come up with some resolutions that we could use to improve our society, or if the movie would have given us some interpretations that were a bit more fresh and creative. However, the themes of feminism and incel culture is also a bit muddled by the depiction of Jack. Because Jack is an incel, and he has imprisoned his girlfriend in this simulation, and has taken her free will from her. So we know that he doesn't view Alice as an equal to himself, because then he wouldn't have done this. Furthermore, he also continuously rapes Alice throughout the movie. And nearing the end, Jack also says that he wants a child. And when he tries to convince Alice to agree to this, he says that having a child would be fun. But having a child isn't just fun, it's a lot of work and a lot of responsibility. And by him stating that he wants a child because it's just fun, it shows us that he isn't planning to take part very much in the raising of this child. He's going to leave it up to Alice. And that he doesn't understand what kind of responsibility it is to have a child. However, throughout most of the movie, Jack is portrayed as a very loving partner. When he looks at Alice, he has stars in his eyes and he adores her, and he puts her pleasure in front of his own. This is portrayed through the sex scenes, and these scenes have been a bit controversial, because Olivia Wilde has talked about them as progressive, because they center around female pleasure instead of male pleasure, as most sex scenes do in movies. However, Florence Pugh has been critical of all the talk around these scenes, because she doesn't want her portrayal of this character to be just boiled down to these particular scenes, because she has worked hard on all of the movie. And I kind of agree with both of them. I understand why Florence wants to be remembered for more than just the sex scenes. And I also agree with Olivia Wilde. However, I don't think the scenes are as progressive as she wants to portray them, because the sex scenes happen when Alice is in the simulation, and she doesn't know that she is in the simulation, and she has been imprisoned there by Harry's character. And though Alice does not interpret any of these events happening in the movie as rape, I do count them as exactly that, because Alice has not consented to being in the simulation. Thus, as she is forced into the simulation, she is also forced to endure these sexual incidents. And as a consequence, I think it's a bit problematic how Olivia Wilde has chosen to portray these scenes, because she portrays them as a form of female empowerment, when they are, in my opinion, not that. So I think the movie kind of misses out on the opportunity to discuss how most women that are sexually assaulted actually know their assaulter, and it could have reflected more around this. Alice could have thought about it and realized it, and this could have been one of the things that made her realize that Jack wasn't actually in love with her, because if he really truly had loved her, then he wouldn't have done this to her. Though I won't lie, I do really enjoy this portrayal of Jack, because I'm a huge fan of Harry Styles, and seeing him act as a loving, significant other is enjoyable. But it makes it harder to realize that he is actually the one that put Alice in this simulation, and that he is kind of the main villain in the movie. Because in the beginning of the movie, I wasn't sure whether or not Jack actually was aware that he was in a simulation. For instance, right before the sex scene in Frank's house, Alice is searching for Jack, and she finds him in Frank's bedroom, and he's dressing himself. And he's saying that he was wondering why he chose to wear this tie, and I thought this might have been a clue that he also didn't quite understand what was happening, and that his brain was trying to figure out that something was wrong, and he was questioning his decisions and choices. Thus, I think it would have been a bit better if the movie portrayed Jack as more misogynistic, that it was a little bit condescending towards Alice, and him being selfish and putting himself first, because this is literally the reason why they are in the simulation in the first place. Consequently, this would have made Jack's character more consistent, making his actions and motives more logical. Moreover, it would have been more in line with the themes of the movie. But going back to the cult thing again, I appreciate how they show Jack worshipping Frank, and how he's willing to do everything to impress him. For instance, when Frank gives Jack a promotion at the Victory Project, which is just a meaningless promotion because Jack doesn't actually work at the Victory Project, you can see how much Jack worships Frank just from the look of his eyes, and also in how Jack dances kind of like a ragdoll when Frank asks him to dance after giving him this promotion. He's willing to do everything he can to please this man. And this is one of the reasons why I suspected that the movie would actually be about a cult, because Frank is so easily able to manipulate the players in this game. He is a puppet master, and he can do whatever he wants with his players. And though this imagery is a bit strange and stupid, I also think that it's very cinematic and kind of beautiful, so I do really like this scene. So I also wanted to touch on the aesthetics of the movie. I feel like it's become a problem today that a lot of movies will just rely on the aesthetic of their movie, instead of putting the work into the plot or the dialogue. Hence, the aesthetics becomes a crutch for the movie. However, I didn't think that this was the issue with Don't Worry Darling. Though it has a beautiful aesthetic, this isn't the selling point of the movie. The acting is good, and the plot is interesting, and the dialogue is good. So the aesthetic being so beautiful as it is just enhances the experience. Furthermore, I also think that the aesthetics has reasonings behind it. It's portrayed in the very aesthetically pleasing 1950s, both with the clothes and there's the decor of the houses and everything. This era was known for being the housewife era, and women going back to the household after having worked during World War II. so it's seen as kind of a less progressive period of time. So it makes sense that this is a time period that Frank would have placed his simulation, and so it just enhances the message of the movie. And as I am a huge fashion history enthusiast, I just wanted to quickly show you the most dazzling outfits worn in the movie because they're great. I would almost recommend going to see this movie just because of the clothes and the aesthetic, even though I've said that I don't like movies that do that, but it's so gorgeous. And lastly, I just wanted to comment on Harry Styles' acting because I've seen a lot of people comment that they thought that his acting wasn't very good. And I thought that he was a fine actor. The only time I thought that his acting was a bit strange was when he was sitting in a car screaming because Alice had realized that something was wrong and wanted to run away together, and he had turned her into Frank and his henchmen. And in the end, when he and Florence have the fight and the confrontation, I will admit that Florence is a better actor, at least at portraying these complex emotions. But just because there's someone out there that is a better actor than him, I don't think that makes him necessarily a bad actor. And I feel that a lot of people have the opinion that being a bad actor has made Harry a morally bad person, which it doesn't. There are hundreds of bad actors out there, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to be a bad actor. And it's doing something that he wants to pursue, and if it makes him happy, then that's totally okay. And I also wanted to give my 2 cents on his and Olivia's relationship. And I don't know if it's a PR relationship or not, but if it isn't, I think it's hugely inappropriate for them to be in a relationship together. And not because Olivia is older than Harry, but because she's his boss. A boss should not be in a relationship with her employee. And she was the director of the movie and was directing Harry and Florence while they were acting out sex scenes. And I think it must be very hugely uncomfortable to act out a sex scene with another person while your maybe sexual partner is directing you. So because of the power imbalance, I really hope that this is just a PR stunt. So these were my kind of unorganized thoughts around the movie Don't Worry Darling. I would recommend everybody go watch it. It's very pretty to look at, it has great actors and an interesting plot. So yeah, have a good day.